Hi, good morning and happy Mother's Pre-Day to all the mothers out there. Name is Dan Daly, and this is my debut. It's called Taboo Talk. And basically, let me jump right in, saying why it's called that Taboo Talk. I'm a victim of alcoholic narcissistic parents who mentally and verbally abused me since before I could remember. My father was as I said, narcissistic, very, he was a fool, to say the least, and for lack of a better adjective. My mother essentially made a deal with my father and my grandparents upstate New York. I was born on Long Island, New York, 1966, September 4th. And essentially, I was supposed to be put up for adoption. My parents conceived me not out of love. Unfortunately, many other people have done that. However, my mother changed her mind, apparently convinced my grandmother to bring me back, which I have no idea how she did that, but I induced that, and apparently she felt sorry for her. Well, subsequently, I was being abused from essentially day one from when I was told. And the picture that you see on the left, bottom left of your screen is a picture of myself at approximately 3 years old. And that's significant because I was told that a night of drinking, my mother was drinking in my grandmother's house where we were living, and pushed my grandmother. My grandmother said, "That's it, get the hell out, you're done." Well, she said, "Fine, I'll take my son, live in my car." What kind of mother does that? The kind of mother that doesn't give a blankety blank about her son and is basically using her son. Well, my grandmother, her mindset was keep the peace. And right then and there, she said, "Fine, don't leave." She claimed she was looking out for me. Well, guess what? You should have called the police. My mother should have gone to jail, and I should have been either adopted by a member of the family or should have been put into an orphanage. Now, that's only a sample, a microcosm of what followed for the next couple of decades. Also led me to become a functioning alcoholic. But that I will leave for another show. Essentially, I might touch on it this right show. I'm not too sure right now. Let me keep going on with this because there's a lot of other people out there I think have dealt with this. It's verbal and mental abuse and neglect, which is far worse than any type of physical abuse that a parent can impose. Scars heal, mental scars can heal if you have the right faith. And trust me when I tell you, no, I'm not imposing or preaching, but having faith and knowing when to surrender yourself helps. And trust me, you will. There are times after that I can remember vividly, not even a year after that went by, and I'm starting to cry already because I remember this like it was yesterday. Okay. My grandparents knew, everyone knew that my mother drank, sometimes starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She would sit out on the lawn and drink. And keep in mind, this is 1967. Now, my grandparents would go to my grandmother's sister's house for a couple of hours, to shoot off steam. What normal people don't go out on a Saturday night. But I knew what was coming. They knew what was coming. they still went out. Now, I'm going to stop there. Give me 1 second. I'm going to make reference to one thing now. Keep in mind what I said before about I should never have been brought back there. I should have been put up for adoption the second my mother used me as a weapon. And my grandmother said, keep the peace. Okay, you can stay. Fine. First of all, my grandparents were 55 when I was born. They had no business being parents or trying to take care of me. They should have. They meant well. That's not good enough. And in effect, that's actually child abuse in itself. Think about it. Now, I went crying to my grandparents on a Saturday night one time. And I couldn't take, I knew it was going to happen. I was hysterical. See, my mother's act was this. And this is before I knew she was actually drinking. She would have Jekyll and Hyde moments. She would call my father a son of a bitch to me. She would tell my grandparents, who at the time I loved, because they were basically treating me like candy when my mother was treating me like garbage. She would be deflecting blame from her faults, blaming my grandparents because, oh, they're spoiling me. Keep in mind, I'm 5 years old, maybe. In fact, I think I was 4 at the time. When a 4-year-old is yelled at from their mother, blaming you, meaning me, or that child, for her mistake, that's not only delusional, that is downright, again, verbal and mental abuse. She was drunk. I didn't know it. She did this. She would say, you're just like your father. How am I just like my father when I'm 4? And my father's, 30 at the time? This is all deflection of blame from her. And she was doing that since the day I was born. This is only a sample of what she did every Saturday night. She would make me cry by telling me how bad I am, or that you don't need your grandparents in your life. I'm good enough for your mother. I'm your mother. You do what I tell you to do. Don't ask questions. Don't say why. In other words, shut up. Do what you're told. At 4 years old? Then she would say, your father's a bastard, to a 4-year-old. And keep in mind, this lady is yelling, okay? She's not saying this like this. After she got me crying, she knew just when my grandparents were going to come home. So about 20 minutes prior to them coming in the front door, a light switch goes on, figuratively. And she would say, Danny, come out here. I'm in tears and I'm scared to death. I come out to a room, not knowing what to think, begging for forgiveness. I'll never forget this. And she's like, I'm so sorry, honey. Wiping my tears from my face with her thumb. You know what thinking back on now? You know what? F you. But you know what? I forgave her the other day. Let me get back to that. She would say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. You're not like your father. It's not your fault. I'll try and do better. This is Jekyll and Hyde stuff. This is Stockholm Syndrome almost stuff, if any of you know what Stockholm Syndrome is. Basically, it makes the person that's under the person's spell mentally dependent on them for what they want them to do. So what she was doing to me, she should have been jailed for it. It's called child endangerment. And people go to jail for years for that and get the kids taken away. But my grandparents said, okay. And also, other people to blame. An uncle of mine, who happens to be on the bottom left picture. You can't see his face, but you can see the person right in back of me looking at my little cousin, who was about 1.5 years at the time. The person above me is my Uncle Bob. He knew, fully aware what was going on. But he's introverted. Still is. And I'm told that he was almost embarrassed by what happened. Gee, no kidding, really? Have the guts to speak up, which he never did. No one in my family did. Thank you, Bobby. As you can see, it's supposed to be a very good Christmas right there. Well, me as a kid, a little child right there, I was after happiness. But guess what? Soon thereafter, my mother would ruin that party. People didn't say a word. All they did was say, okay, well, that's Kathleen. And it happens in every home. They justified it, basically. Okay? Which is complete BS. They justified it. Rather than call the police and admit that there's trouble, once you admit something, you can fix it. The hardest part of all is admitting something. It's called humility. This went on for years until I finally started rebelling. I'm probably 12 years old. And this gets even better. I'm in junior high school. And my grades plummeted. I went from A's to C's in a matter of weeks. So the psychologist summons my mother. And my mother blames my grandmother, as I knew she would. And there's one thing you got to realize about people that are deflecting blame or know their guilt. They get very, very angry. And you can see it in their facial movements, their tones, which is obvious to everyone. If you know, it's obvious that they're hiding something. But cowards run. And she deflected blame. She lied. She will lie right to your face. But the one thing she'll also do, and she did in this session, was the doctor told her to her face, your son said you drink at night. Because at the time, I was old enough to realize she drank. She exploded. She said, how dare you accuse me of drinking alcohol around my son? I jumped in and I said, very shyly, but I said, you do. She jumped up and said, you are being punished. I crumpled up like a little snail. I was scared to death of what I was going to face at home. The doctor told her flat out, if I hear of anything, the police are going to be called. And then she said, I'm going to get my mother in here, and she'll prove it, that he's spoiled. Subsequently, about 2 weeks later, it happened. They both came in. I was in a session with the school psychologist. By the way, this is at McKenna Junior High School. It's back in 78. Long story short about this one is both parties blame the other. My mother said he goes running to his grandmother for because his grandmother spoils him. Well, that's translated to hugs, love, and kisses because my mother wouldn't give me any of that. She wouldn't talk to me. The only thing she would do is criticize me. And, I forgot to also mention, this happened while she was sober, too. Now, I'm kind of running out of time here for this segment, folks. There's a lot more of this in different vivid remembrances that I will tell you. Now, you're probably sitting thinking to yourself, doesn't sound that bad. Well, you know what? It was. No child should have to go through any type of mental abuse or verbal abuse, especially family standing by and watching it, not doing anything because they want to keep the peace, or don't they realize that it's destroying that child? Now, what's a bigger sin? A sin's not keeping peace. A sin is destroying that child. Now, I'm going to touch on a little bit in the last couple of seconds that I have here. This led to alcoholism, a functioning alcoholic on my part. Put myself through college, 3.26 GPA, St. John's University. I'm sorry, 3.12, 3.26 with Nassau. Drank at night and masturbated at night. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was ashamed back then. I would never have said this back then. But you know what? It's therapeutic. It's fantastic to admit it because other people can actually say, okay, I did that. This guy's not afraid to say it. Don't be afraid to say it. It helps you. And the people that are saying, what's he talking about that for? It's ridiculous. No, it's not ridiculous. Ask people to tell the truth. What's wrong with it? Would you rather not hear the truth? People aren't ready for that. And that's, again, why I call this taboo talk. There's a lot of other subjects I'm going to be discussing. There's something called something to do with parents. I forgot what it's called. Helicopter parents. That's what it was. Folks, in the last couple of seconds I saw something starting about 15 years ago. I still can't get over this. Massapequa High School, Long Island, New York. I used to live on Reese Avenue, block away from Massapequa. These kids our age at 18, 17 used to drive, to school. That used to be commonplace. Long story short for this one, parents of 15, 16, and 17-year-olds and 18s are picking their own kids up. I asked one of the parents, and you know what they said? Because my kid wants to ride home. I'm saying, well, why doesn't he walk? They don't want to. It goes a lot further than that, folks. But as of right now, that's going to be the end of the show. And trust me, there's going to be a lot more taboo talk. I'm hoping that you people will subscribe. Hopefully call in soon, because I'd be happy. And that's it, folks. Have a good day.